Welcome to Manifest This, Believer versus Skeptic. I'm Sharon, your resident skeptic who asks all the tough questions. And with me is Jennifer Neal, our manifesting maestro. Whether you're rolling your eyes or raising your vibration, we dive into all things manifestation, mindset, and energy from every side. Hit subscribe, settle in, and get ready for spirited debates, surprising experiments, and laughter on the journey to creating a life you love. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Manifest This, Believer versus Skeptic. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, and that is when getting cut off sets you free. And Jen, I think this is something that's interesting for both of us because we've both experienced it and are coming to new revelations as a result. Great to
I'm
see you. How are
good.
you?
I'm good. Yeah, so we've talked about this before about being cut off by friends, family, associates, colleagues. We've been and sometimes not necessarily a clean cut, but a feeling where you've definitely been sidelined. In fact, I remember somebody telling me it might have been you, Sharon. Do you remember telling me a story about a friend of yours years ago, that you kept trying to get together with and come at and suggest some things, and you kept feeling or this person, tell me if this rings true, if you remember this, but this person wasn't responding, wasn't getting back to you, and you started to think maybe there was something wrong there. And so finally you or the person said, "Is there something going on here?" That like, or maybe didn't even declare it, but tried one more time to get in touch with this person, and this person finally turned around and said, "Don't you get it? I don't wanna be friends with you anymore."
Yeah, so I have a recollection of
Does
this
that re I
happening.
knew it was you.
Yeah, I have a recollection of this happening because they had been someone that I had known since childhood, and our
Yeah,
families were well connected with each other and, Christmases together and all of those sorts of things. And, there wasn't one thing that I could put my finger on, but I kept reaching out as one does when someone has been in their lives for, 25 years at that time. So it was one of those very interesting things. And I think what you bring to mind is often we're so open hearted in the hopes that maybe the person is having a bad time or, the communication isn't quite there yet or whatever it needs to happen.
yeah,
But you know me, I'm a relatively direct person. So if you don't want me in your life, then just tell me. And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with just saying that as
yeah,
opposed to, that lovely word most of us hate, ghosting,
yeah,
which I think
right.
is incredibly discourteous.
It is, and it can be very painful, more painful than the break itself.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit then about when somebody cuts you off and what your realization was.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been through a couple of cutoffs in my life. I've had a couple of really dear friends make it very clear to me that they wanted me out of their life. It's happened to me more than once, and it doesn't feel good, especially initially. But I had a real realization this week that honestly surprised it even surprised me, and I shouldn't be surprised because I know that everything in life is for our highest good, right? But I realize that being cut off by someone in your life that you love, whether it's a friend or a family or a colleague, it might have been necessary for your expansion. And so let me explain. And again, I don't mean that in a bitter way, and I don't mean that in a revenge way. I mean it in a very calm, almost clinical way,
Right.
like removing a bad tissue in your body or removal of a blockage that was going to make you ill. When I really recognized that this absence was for my highest good, it was for my expansion, all of a sudden I felt free.
Interesting.
And, not because I don't care, because obviously we care. And if we could have it a different way, we'd have these people back in our life. But, and again, it's not that I don't value the relationship because I do. I don't necessarily value where the relationship ended up or where it got to, but I feel free now because I realized how much of my nervous system had been orienting around this person's perception of me. and the decisions I was making. And that reference point now has kind of disappeared. And something really opened up, which was, how much of our life are we living inside other people's emotional architecture without even realizing it?
Yeah. I I'm hearing you on a couple of different levels here. I mean, on the one hand, having had a similar experience, often we don't realize what the mental load or mental toll the relationship is taking on us until it's gone.
Yeah,
And there is the heartbreak and the difficulty around it. I think the other piece to this is also sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes
I
it's
think
about what they need as
I
well.
think you're absolutely right. In fact, I think 99.9% of the time, it's not about us. I mean, listen, there are parts of both of us or all of us that we know might trigger other people,
Sure.
might not be what other people necessarily, the parts of us that we don't even love about ourselves, but everybody has that. So that then becomes for me an even and a level playing ground because if I trigger you and you trigger me, that means we're no better or worse than the other person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's not a judgment. And I think this is where people can sometimes get themselves into trouble. Because on the one hand, I completely understand what you're saying about feeling free when someone's judgment of you isn't present in your life anymore. But here's where I'll bring in a bit of skepticism. On the other hand, isn't there a risk of just reframing rejection as expansion so that you don't have to feel the hurt? So, how do you know that this is genuine growth and maybe just not a coping mechanism?
Well, before we dive into that, is that so bad if we reframe rejection as expansion? I mean, what a beautiful thing to go through life, just not even thinking much about the rejection part, but thinking more about the expansion part
Sure.
and knowing that everything happens for our highest good. Even if it doesn't look good initially, it is always for our highest good. And remembering that that rejection was necessary for your expansion.
Right. But we know you can get mired in the rejection for a time period. So,
For sure.
it might take you a few steps to get to that reframing.
Yeah. No, for sure. So, listen, I think the answer lives inside the nervous system, not inside the story. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nervous spine expert, but I do understand the connection between your nervous system and what you want in your life.
Mhm.
And listen, this isn't about pretending that something doesn't hurt because let's face it, if somebody kicks you out of their life, whether it's a friend or a family member, it hurts because the
Sure.
first thing we do is, what did I do wrong? We immediately go to self blame.
If we're not
And
narcissists.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I do it all the time. What did I do wrong? What did I contribute to this? But underneath the hurt, there's a constant subtle tension that I kind of didn't even realize was there until it was gone, right? Like, and I'm not saying, and this tension isn't good tension. This is a part of me that was always asking, is this the version of me that's acceptable? Is this decision going to be judged? Do I need to explain myself as to why I did or didn't do something? And I don't think that's necessarily unique to me. I think that's something that most people experience in close relationships, whereby, especially in family relationships, as family members they hold a version of you in their mind, in my case, for 56 years,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've known you for 56 years, Jennifer. How could you be anything different than what I've always known of you? Or you're getting worse and worse and worse. That part of you I knew is just getting worse and worse and worse.
Or you're
And so
not
with
or you're not living to the framework I have of you as a big sister or a friend or whatever, and
yeah,
because you're not living up to that, you're in the wrong because your
or
experience
you've changed.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you
yeah,
wanted to change and you are changing, and so you've changed. Yeah. So whether you realize it or not, your nervous system is constantly orienting around that version of you.
right. This resonates with me more than I expected actually, because I can think of certain people in my life where I might behave differently depending on who I'm around.
For
And
sure.
it's not fake or anything like that, but we edit ourselves in different scenarios and situations. I think part of it might be based on a trust. Part of it
Mhm.
may be based on expectations of, what I perceive those people expect of me and vice versa. And I've never really thought about it as a nervous system regulation. I just sort of thought about it, oh, well, this is just social awareness. These are the, masks or the personas that we wear in specific situations. But I think what you're saying is that editing yourself constantly requires energy.
And we all do it all the time. We are all wearing a mask that is showing the world, showing our friends, showing our family what we want them to see of us, not when we get triggered. But, when we get dressed up, when we go out at night, we are showing a side that we want people to see about us, and we're hiding the stuff that we don't want them to see. So the mask really is a barrier between, I don't want you to see what's going on this side because I don't like this side of me, or it's too painful to look at, or whatever
Or
that
I don't
is.
trust you.
Or I don't trust you with that side of me,
Yeah.
that vulnerable side. So yeah, for sure. We're constantly editing. We're constantly editing, and that's constantly monitoring. Like, imagine if your job was to sit and monitor a security camera 24 hours a day, right? And you never got a break. You never got your lunch. You never took a break. You never went outside. Like, that's what we're doing with this constant on edge part of us. And your subconscious is constantly scanning for how we're being perceived. And if I think for a minute that you're judging me or criticizing me or questioning me with the energy I'm getting from you, I'm going to constantly be altering that because I
Right,
need to be liked. Right? We
right.
all know our survival, old crocodile brain can't be kicked out of the tribe. And so we're constantly shifting and shifting and shifting to make sure that we're liked. And that's exhausting. So when these people, just to kind of bring this back, when these people exit our life, sure, you can feel rejected. But what if you also feel that freed up energy? Like, not metaphorically, literally, your energy is not consumed with that anymore. Like, that's where there's a ton of opportunity.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to push back a little bit because someone could be listening to this and saying, okay, well, then anyone who challenges me is holding me back, so I should just cut them off. I'm just going to remove them. And to me, that doesn't sound particularly healthy either because sometimes people challenge us in ways that help us grow. So, how do you distinguish between someone who's holding you back versus someone who is helping you evolve?
That's a really important distinction. And I mean, for me, I'll tell you, it feels different inside your body. But growth isn't about removing everyone who makes you uncomfortable. Listen, if that were the case, and we all know people that continuously remove people from their life, why do they need to continuously move people from their life?
Yeah.
Clearly, that's not working.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being in a relationship and watching another woman be day by day removed from conversations, removed from experiences. I just watched her from another woman be continuously removed and removed and removed and removed to the point where she wasn't even considered anymore.
So when you say removed, was she being removed from the conversation or was she removing herself?
No, no, no. She was being removed
Okay.
by, like, I'll call her a Heather, right? Like, so there was a king tall poppy, as you call it, a tall poppy removing a lower poppy from the group over time, over time, over time, and eventually she was completely cut off, and I was not. But then guess what happened a few years later?
You were removed.
I was starting to get removed and removed and removed and removed, and today we don't have a relationship. So, and I've seen it happen in other instances in my life. These people just keep removing. And I know, like, listen, we've talked about the Mel Robbins let them theory. Like, sure, let them, kick them out. But something is wrong if you need to keep kicking people out of your life for you to feel good. I'm no saint, trust me. I'm loud. I can be quite direct. It can bother people that are a little more sensitive than me. But if that continues to bother you, there's some work that you might need to do, right?
Sure.
Because it's
Okay.
easy to go, I don't want that anymore.
Yep.
And we all do a certain respect of that. But anyway, let's get back on topic here. I think to answer your question, how do you distinguish between someone who's holding you back versus someone who's helping you evolve? Growth isn't about noticing whether the discomfort leads to expansion or contraction, but expansion feels like you can finally be yourself, like you can still breathe, like you can evolve inside the relationship. Like I am living a life right now that I 5 years ago was on a vision board. The life I'm living now, I'm currently in my home in Florida that I wanted and I bought 5 years ago, but up until about 4.5 years ago, I felt like I didn't belong here because people were judging me for that decision. How could you do that, Jennifer? You know, I've got adult kids at home, and yet I still felt guilty for spending a portion of the year in Florida. Contraction, so let's talk about contraction. Contraction feels like always bracing, always defending, always explaining, constantly shrinking parts of yourself just to be okay with another person. And, over time, the contraction limits your evolution.
Well, I think the important distinction that you're making here is one sort of blooms you and the other takes the sun away from you. And I think if you're dealing with individuals who put you in a place where you are not blooming, I mean, we've always got opportunities to expand and grow, but that only really exists if there's willingness on both sides. And
Yeah.
if there's one party that just wants to shut it down and isn't interested, or interestingly enough, might have the expectation that, oh, well, since you were always the fixer, you will chase me. You will make it better. You will
Mhm.
concede. You will A, B, and C because that's what they're used to from you.
Mhm.
But if you're the individual who's like, "But I've evolved and I've grown, and that's work or a mask I don't wanna wear anymore," then it becomes a point of friction. So sometimes it's less about what the other person is doing and more about what your nervous system is doing in response to them, where you can then make the decision, "I can't do this anymore,"
Mhm.
regardless of what their expectations are.
Yeah. As we talk about this and as I think about this, I'm thinking, well, Jennifer, didn't you do the same thing? Didn't you realize you're better off without that energy in your life? And part of me is like, why couldn't you be expanded in the relationship? Why
Right.
couldn't you have felt, I don't care what you think. I love you so much. I don't care what you think. I wanted this. I'm living this. I'm going to just relish in this. And I often ask myself, why couldn't you feel this way in that relationship? But I couldn't. But again, I wasn't the one that left. So I think God, source, inner being, the universe, whatever you want to call this infinite power that is within all of us, knew I couldn't get to my next level of expansion and what I want in life with that person in my life. And therefore, they removed it for me. And
Right.
now I'm like, hallelujah, because I feel like I have got this massive weight off my back now. And I don't know whether I would have done it myself.
Mhm.
So, you can still love someone and someone can love you and still hold a version of you that you've outgrown. Like, I love that saying when someone says, oh my gosh, you've changed. And you have one of two reactions to that. You can say, no, I haven't. I'm still the same person. I'm here, I'm in here. Or you
Yep.
can say, you betcha I've changed. And I worked on that change and I didn't want to be that version of myself anymore. So, someone can still love you. They can still hold a version of you that you've outgrown. And their nervous system might still expect you to be that person,
Mhm.
right? And you might get together again and they still expect, well, maybe this time she'll show up as the same person. And you don't. And then they'll say, well, and maybe this time you'll show up as that person that I knew and grew up with and knew so well, and you don't. And so when you're not the person they expect you to be, that creates friction. Not because you're bad, not because they're bad, but because you're no longer operating inside the same identity agreement that you had in your past.
So I'm smiling because here's where I'm amused.
Okay.
We fundamentally, as human beings, we change every single day. So even that person who observes you and says to you, but you've changed, have themselves changed as well.
Mhm.
And what they are not realizing is that as much as the person they're observing has changed, so has they, which then naturally means that the relationship itself will have changed.
For sure.
Yeah,
I mean, we know we can look at, and I have experienced, even in a romantic relationship, if the two energies stay the same as to how they came together, you keep going along, everything's great. But if one person starts to grow and the other person doesn't and stays the same as they were on the day that you met, that's danger. Danger, because that's going to continue to rift.
yeah,
And it's really hard to bring that back in, 'cause this person's never gonna go back.
right.
The one that's going off and growing is never gonna come back to what they were, and unless the other person starts to do some growing as well, it's a recipe for disaster.
So here's where I struggle a bit with the spiritual framing of this because
Okay.
I worry that saying this was necessary for my expansion makes it sound like everything is preordained or purposeful. And sometimes, relationships just end because, as I said to you earlier, people are gonna people. People are just messy, or maybe somebody made a decision, or maybe the timing changed. So, why does it have to mean something bigger?
Well, let me explain it to you the way that I understand it and the way that I kind of build a metaphor around it. I'm looking at this beautiful tropical tree outside my window right now. And some of the leaves are beautiful and green, and the flowers are pink and gorgeous. And others of the leaves are dying, and the branches are doing this, they're hanging down and they're dead and they're going to fall off. That tree, though, is not going to stop growing, right? The tree, everything in nature is so abundant, it never stops, but it can't take everything with it.
Yeah.
It can't take the dead leaves, it can't take the dead bark, it can't take the dead flowers with it, and it doesn't care what the shrub beside it thinks about it.
It can't take what used to serve them with them
Exactly.
in
And
order
it
to grow.
used it, and it powered it, and it fed it, and then it fell away. And so if we just look to nature, like all of these beautiful little shrubs out my window, they're all happy together. And they're changing together, and they're dropping dead stuff off of themselves together. And they're so happy. But why is it when we start to drop dead things off of us, attitudes we don't want, things about us, like I don't love my quick reaction, my quick to, I'm working on that, my quick to anger, my quick to, I'm just quick, right? Like I'm quick,
Yeah.
but it served me in my sales career. But I don't love how it shows up sometimes, and I'm trying to get rid of that part. And why is it we're so quick to judge people for the parts of them that they haven't outgrown yet? Like, we're really hard on each other.
Yeah, well, we wanna assign meaning to things, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, back to your point, like, why does it always need to be bigger? Like, this was necessary for my expansion to lose this dead branch or to lose this dead part of me. And you know what? Fine. It doesn't need to be something bigger for you, but meaning is something we assign after the fact, right? It's easy to look back and go, oh, that's why that happened, or that's what that must have meant. And the meaning that you assign to things determines how you integrate the experience. So, I mean, I've always had a tendency towards growth and towards expansion and towards wanting the biggest, boldest, best, most beautiful life. New movie out, by the way, The Big, Bold, Beautiful Life, that with Margot Robbie. Haven't finished it yet, but like there's this big, bold, beautiful life out there for us. And this movie, as I say, I started watching it on the plane on the way to Mexico, and I couldn't hear very well because the plane was so loud. So I decided to park it and I'll come back to it. But there's these series of doors in this movie that Margot Robbie and is it Justin Theroux? I can't figure out who that guy is.
I
Anyway,
don't know.
Margot Robbie and the lead guy have to go through, or they have they don't have to go through. They have the opportunity to go through these doors, and they don't know what they're going to be met with on the other side. Can't wait to finish this movie, obviously. Like it's so up my alley. But, we have these opportunities for growth all the time, but we choose and scared, and this is what's normal for me. We choose to stay stuck. So if we continue to assign, we're talking today about, when people leave our life or when we're kicked out of people's lives, whether it's friends or whether it's colleagues or whether it's family, we tend to I go to the place where, I was rejected because I wasn't enough or maybe I was too much.
Right.
And when we do that, when we say, I was too much or I wasn't enough, our nervous system contracts. We make ourselves smaller, right? And if you assign the meaning instead that this space was created for me to fully grow into the version of me that I asked for, that I want, that is available to me, your nervous system expands.
Okay.
And so the event is the same. We've talked about this before, but the integration is different.
So you're not saying that the universe necessarily orchestrated it. You're saying the meaning you assign to it determines the outcome internally to you.
Well, exactly, yes, and I also, though, think it was orchestrated. Like, I think when you ask God's source being, inner being, the universe for something, the universe always is like, "Okay, this is what Jennifer wants. I'm gonna get her there as fast as possible. We need to get rid of this person for her to go there." We can attach meaning and say, "I don't want that person to leave. I don't want the divorce. I don't want that rift. I don't want that person to leave my life." And the universe then goes, "Gosh, she's being so stubborn. I'm trying to get her to that thing she wants. We're going to have to come around the bypass now." So I do think there's orchestration. However, for the skeptics here, and for anyone that's new, we are recording a live podcast today for Manifested This, Believer versus Skeptic. I am the believer. Sharon, that you cannot see, is the skeptic. So we banter back and forth and we argue our positions. But, if I go down your road, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be orchestrated for you skeptics. Okay. Manifestation isn't necessarily about controlling events. It's not. It's about controlling identity integration within those events after events occur. So you can look back on the breakup and say, "Oh gosh, I never would have met my new boyfriend that's freaking amazing and my soulmate if I hadn't broken up with that dud I dated for 2 years." Right? And it's the hindsight that allows you to go back and say, "That was necessary for my expansion."
So if we continue then with your analogy with Margot Robbie and the Doors event, you could stay in the same room with the same challenge and the same person,
Yeah.
or you can leave the room and close the door in order to experience the next room or the room after that or the room after that. It's not that the room no longer exists. It's not that the person within that room no longer exists. It's that you've seen that room and maybe it's time to look at a different one.
Or you stay in the same room with a different perspective and attitude. And
Okay.
we've talked about this in the podcast in the past. We all go to parties. Same party, same drinks, same menu, same food, same friends.
Different perspectives.
And I'm going to come away from that party and go, "Man, that was a banger of a party. I had the best time." And you might come away from that party saying that party sucked. There was nobody there worth talking to. I hated every minute of it. I didn't like what I wore. I want to go home to the garden and eat worms.
Yeah.
That was a famous song when we were little. So I think that you don't need to change rooms to change your life.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit because you mentioned it earlier on in the podcast about your freedom after this release that you've experienced.
Yeah, so what surprised me the most was noticing how quickly my internal landscape shifted after I realized that this person left my life not because I was bad, but because it had to happen for my expansion.
Okay.
And again, we can reframe every bad thing that happens in our life. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to reframe anything that's happening, a breakup, a health issue, a wealth issue. Like, all of these issues, if we reframe them, we can look at them much more differently. And it takes a load off our nervous system if we can look at it from a different perspective. So again, like, it's not that the relationship didn't matter, because it did and it does, but it's because I realized how much subconscious energy I had been devoting to this relationship that I couldn't change or fix or manage. I couldn't manage it. And so when that energy becomes available to me again, and I'm literally able to drop my shoulders and just release the air out of my lungs and take a breath, it feels like stepping into a much bigger, wider, more awesome version of myself. And I'm not a different person. I'm just a person without restriction now. And I'm not so hard on myself.
And I think what's really interesting in all of this too is we're not describing anger here at all. It's not
Mm-mm.
they did this and they should have done that and I expected this. What you're actually describing is a clarity around how you want to relate or not relate to that person. And I think that's a very important distinction
Yeah.
because clarity doesn't need the other person to be wrong. It's just acknowledging that something's changed.
Totally. And again, it's taking the energy away from that, the bad energy. It's
Yeah,
taking away the energy that says, I was bad, she was bad, he was bad, they were bad, it's all bad. It's not bad. It just is. And what does that open up for you, maybe? You know
right,
what I mean? So, yeah, it's not about blame. It's about recognizing when your nervous system doesn't feel good and eh, and it's no longer when you're constantly organizing it around somebody else's expectations, that doesn't feel good. And I'll tell you what the big signal is.
okay.
You want to know what the big signal is that your energy is wrapped up with someone else?
More than anything, Jennifer.
You talk about them all the time.
Interesting. Yeah,
You talk about them all the time and how much you wish things were different, how you don't know what you did, you don't know what happened. You talk about them all the time to anybody that will listen.
right.
And when you are constantly talking about a relationship in your life that is not working for whatever reason, that's your first signal that your energy is wrapped up with this person and not in a good way.
Okay, so let's have a bit of a closing reflection. So, if someone is listening and they're currently going through a rupture in a relationship, what would you want them to consider?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I did, right? So I try not to say anything that isn't something I've either gone through, been through, or had to deal with. So the simple question I have started to ask myself is this: do I feel more like myself with that relationship in my life or without that relationship in my life? Whether I can get there or not, we all should be able to live like the bushes out the window, right? Everyone gets along. Everyone knows you're different. We got some high, we got some low, we got some pink, we got some green, but humans can't do that very
Right,
well.
right.
So, do I feel more like myself or less like myself in the absence of this relationship? Okay. Because the answer will tell you everything. It's not about the other person, it's about your nervous system. How do you feel now that that relationship has ended or stalled or paused? How do you feel? And your nervous system always knows where your expansion lives.
So, this is a very grounded way of looking at it because no one is villainized and it's really just acknowledging change.
Hmm. Yeah. Release isn't always loss. Just like back to the analogy of the trees. Like they're not worried about these dead leaves dropping. They're probably quite happy to know that they're continuing their growth and continuing their beauty and their expansion. So sometimes it's the removal of unconscious limitation. Like we just couldn't get to the next level consciously because this is holding us back and it's trapped in our subconscious. And when that limitation lifts, that's where all the fruit is. Back to the tree analogy. One of my favorite quotes from back in, even in my 20s was, "Don't be afraid to go out on the branches because that's where all the fruit is."
Lovely. Well, with that, Jen, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion, as always. And to all our listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this. And we look forward to delivering you another podcast next week. Thanks, everybody, and bye for now.
So that's a wrap, live listeners, on our podcast today. This is the first day we've gone live with it, and we're going to do it again next week. So, as much as we haven't co hosted live in TikTok, we might do that next time. We're both pretty new to the live experience, but you can check out all of our podcasts at Manifest This, Believer versus Skeptic. We release a new podcast every Friday. We've been doing this for almost a full year, and we will continue to bring them to you, all about manifestation, the law of attraction. Sharon's the skeptic, I'm the believer, and we have an interesting discussion every Wednesday. So we're going to sign off for now, but thanks for joining us. I hope you come back next Wednesday at 7 Eastern Standard Time, and you can have the life of your dreams. You just have to go out there and get it.
Thanks for tuning in to Manifest This Believer versus Skeptic. If you enjoyed today's conversation, share it with a friend, believer or skeptic. And don't forget to leave us a review so others can join in the debate. Plus, check out Jennifer's TikTok account, Manifestation RX, where she writes daily prescriptions for manifesting your dreams. Think practical tips with a dash of magic. We love hearing your questions and stories, so tell us what you're manifesting or questioning this week. Until next time, keep an open mind and maybe manifest a little magic.